Okay. Welcome to this extra talk about Jakarta EE 11. I know Graham was supposed to be here, but for some reason he couldn't be here, so I was asked to fill in. So let's go over what's going on with Jakarta EE and Jakarta EE 11 in particular. So my name is Ivar Grimstad, and I'm the Jakarta EE developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. And these are my social media coordinates, so you can follow me. Feel free to ask questions, comments in any of these channels afterwards. And in addition to working for the Eclipse Foundation with Jakarta EE, I'm also actually an Apache NetBeans committer, although I usually use IntelliJ on stage these days. But anyway, I'm also running a Java user group in Malmö in Sweden. So let's talk about Jakarta EE and see where we come from and where we're going. So I'm starting just a little bit back with Jakarta EE 9. And Jakarta EE 9 was released around 2020. We did 2 releases of 9, actually, one for Java 8 and one for Java 11. The 9 release was all about the namespace change from JavaX to Jakarta. So we didn't do much other things to make the migration as easy as possible. Then in 2022, we released Jakarta EE 10. And the big thing, or the thing about Jakarta EE 10, it had a lot of updates and a lot of specifications, but it was the Jakarta EE core profile, which is a new profile, the first one introduced since Java EE 6 when web profile was introduced. And that brings us to 2024 and Jakarta EE 11. And hopefully this talk will remove these question marks and fill it with some of what we're delivering in 11. And first I want to repeat what I said in the talk earlier. Today, Jakarta EE is about specifications. And specifications are usually described in a textual form in a PDF or HTML file, which you can download from the web and read about it. It's human readable, explains the technology. There is an API artifact in Maven Central that we as developers use when we code. And there's a TCK or test compatibility kit. That is a test suite that tests if an implementation fulfills all the requirements in this specification and the API. And when an implementation passes the TCK, it is a compatible implementation. And we need at least one open source compatible implementation to ratify a final specification. And from there on, it can be any license for any of the implementations. And we want as many as possible. And Jakarta EE 10, which is the current release out there until 11 comes, had a lot of updates from 9. All the blue ones were updated in 10. And all of these specifications have a API, a specification document, an API in Maven Central, so you can use, for example, just activation if you, for some reason, want to do that, or you can use the whole bundle. That is also a specification. So the platform is built up from a lot of smaller specifications, which each of them have these document, API, and TCK associated with them. And if we look at what 11 will bring, it's about the same amount of updates as with 10. There are some that aren't updated here and some that are updated. And we will go through the changes in each of these in this talk. So, Jakarta EE 11. The Jakarta EE 11 platform, that's the specification that contains all the specifications. And that is if you create a typical enterprise application. If you don't need the enterprise flavored specification, you only need the web profile, that is a subset of the platform. And it has all the specifications and all the technologies you need to create typical web applications, such as with the web UI and the RESTful endpoints and security and etc. And then we have the core profile, which is the smallest platform or specification that we have. And that is targeting for microservices or headless clients or just RESTful endpoints. And these are the specifications that you need to create that. And the CDI Lite specification here is that was new in 10. And CDI Lite is a flavor of CDI that takes away the dynamic runtime features of CDI and replaces them with compile time. So all the dynamic things that usually were discovered at runtime are now discovered at compile time, so you can do that to do ahead of time compilation with, for example, GraalVM to create native images. And with Jakarta 11, we're raising the API levels. So with 10, we had the baseline of Java SE 11. So now we're going to 17. Initially, we were planning to go to 21, but we kind of backed back a little. And I think that was a wise decision when we see how the APIs are actually being used. And if you look at Spring, for example, they raised their API level to support Jakarta EE 9 with the Spring Boot 3 and Spring Framework 6. And they're already now in Spring Boot 3 to 4 and the next version of the framework, bringing in Jakarta 11 specifications. And they wouldn't be able to do that if we were on 21, because they are still supporting 17. So the ecosystem is kind of there. So we shouldn't be the one leading the pace with driving too far ahead. But we're doing the same thing we did with 10, and that is make sure it works on 21. So you have it on, you can use 21 in your runtimes. We're just making sure it works on 17 and 21, and most of the runtimes work on 22 as well. So you can always use the latest Java version, but we guarantee when we release that we pick these two. And that brings us to the release cadence we've kind of chosen now, and that is, so it was about 2 years between these releases, and that's been just by pure luck or accident or whatever. But now we're explicitly saying that after an LTS of Java, we want to release a version of Jakarta EE like 6 to 9 months after. So Java 21 was released September last year. So 9 months after, that brings us here to June, July. And that's what we're aiming for with Jakarta 11. And that's the release cadence we hope to drive forward with as well. So yeah, another thing we're doing in this release is to introduce the concept of milestones. And we haven't done this formally before in this way, and that is, we set up some dates we wanted to release the specification and especially the APIs to Maven Central. And we had 4 milestones, and we've done the 3 first of them. Actually, milestone 3 was released to Maven Central yesterday. So it says April there, but that was when the specifications were ready. And it is a little lead time to get them approved and to get them into Maven Central. So milestone 4, which is set to be May here, that was the deadline for the specifications were end of May. And then they need to be approved and then get into Maven Central. So we're just waiting for the last 2 specifications to make it to Maven Central, and then we can release milestone 4. And then we're into the release candidate phase. So we're getting there closely. So we're at milestone 3 is available now, milestone 4 is coming soon. And as a final specification, this is kind of for the milestone specifications that were in the previous releases. We didn't require a compatible implementation and a TCK to be run. We just want the API and specification documents to be ready. So if you try out milestone 4 or milestone 3 of the specification, we don't actually have a compatible implementation yet because we're waiting for the TCK to be done. So the theme for 11 is developer productivity and performance, which is kind of inspiring the title of this talk, or maybe it's this talk that inspires this theme. I don't know. But we're aiming for H1 2024. That is kind of end of June. We're saying June, July. It's a little shaky right now. It may be a little later after summer because summer vacations hit us and the TCK isn't done yet. So it may be a little longer than we anticipated. So it may be Q3 rather than H1, but it's still in the kind of what we can expect. With this release, we have some cross-cutting concerns in addition to the updates of every specification. And some of these are, I don't know if it's a cross-cutting concern, but we're taking managed bean and getting rid of it. So we're removing managed bean because there are fully capable replacements alternatives by CDI. So managed beans isn't really needed any longer, so we don't want to maintain it, so we take it away. It's still there for the old versions and stuff, and it will probably be maintained with service releases, but it won't be updated for future platform releases. You're probably familiar with the JEP 4.11 for Java SE that is deprecating the security manager for removal. It hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened in 21. It hasn't happened in 22. It probably won't happen in 23. I don't know when it's going to happen. But to be kind of prepared for that, we're removing references to the security manager all across Jakarta EE, so we don't have that hanging over us as a deadline when it suddenly is removed from Java SE. We're also embracing Java records in a lot of specifications, which we'll see when we go through the updates. And we're removing optional features. We don't want to have optional things in the platform. We're still allowing optional features in the individual specifications, so there can be optional things there. If you read the document, you will see something is marked as optional. But that means it's not required when it's included in the platform, unless the platform team decides that, yes, this is a good thing, we want to require it. So optional features in the platform specifications shouldn't be there any longer, or won't be there after 11. It's something we've been working on for a long time by deprecating things, but now we're actually doing it. So let's go through these specifications that are updated, the blue ones. And I'll start with grouping all the security specifications together because it makes more sense to talk of them as one. And the Jakarta security specification is one that you as developers will probably be the one using the APIs and facing, but the authentication or authorization are underneath there doing this stuff and bringing it to you. And the three kind of bigger things they're doing in security to these is to create the possibility to have multiple authentication mechanisms. I'll show a little example of that afterwards. And also qualifiers for built-in authentication mechanisms, as well as an in-memory identity store. And we'll look at those in a little bit more detail next slide. Also, we're introducing a JW2 bridge, which is kind of a cooperation with the microprofile, because microprofile has support for JSON Web Tokens authentication. And we want to do that in Jakarta as well. But in order to do that without creating a circle of dependency, because if we brought in microprofile JWT directly, and microprofile JWT depends on stuff in Jakarta EE, then we would create these circles, and we don't like circles in these kind of diagrams. So that's why we create a bridge specification in between. It's not done yet, but it will be supported as soon as it is. So security are these three specifications. They have the security specification and the authentication and authorization. And if we look at one of the things there is the roles allowed. Previously, if you had a roles allowed in your system, like you said, the role foo can do something and are allowed to do stuff. That means that was the stuff that foo could do anytime, all the time, without exceptions, more or less. And if you wanted to tweak this, let's say, oh, I only want it between this hour and that hour, you would have to create a new role for that. But what you can do now is to add that custom policy programmatically. And the example here is that if you have the role foo and it's not within working hours, then you're not having access, for example. You can do all sorts of other things there, but this is one example where we just say, within working hours, foo can do stuff. Outside of working hour, you can't do. You can also have not his working hours outside in the beginning and short circuit the entire thing, so you just don't do the other checks. And at the end, you fall back to the original policy. So this is a very flexible, programmatic way of managing access to your system. This is the in-memory identity store I mentioned. And this is that if you do for testing or having a system where you don't need the real, it's probably more for testing. and test environments, but you can put the identity store definition in the code. So just have the test users there defined so you can use them. And when you go in production, this will be not be enabled, so you wouldn't be able to log in with Peter and secret 1 in production because it will be overridden by something. All right, concurrency. So concurrency will support virtual threads. And if you think about how threads are usually managed or supported in Java EE and Jakarta EE traditional, it's that we kind of like threads, but we don't want you to mess with them. So we want you to use this managed executor service. We want to use these managed thread factory and let the container manage this for you. Otherwise, it may kill the threads without. And if you start messing with threads, you're probably doing something wrong. So we're all about this managed thing. So how does this fit with the concept of virtual threads, which is much cheaper to create? So it turns out that we actually like virtual threads equally much. And then you may also put a question mark with how are we going to handle this? Because when we said we're going to support virtual threads, we thought we would do Java 21 all together. And then we ended up, oh, we have to support 17 as well. How can we do this? Well, we're actually in the API not exposing any virtual threads things. We just add a flag here and there where it makes sense. For example, in this managed execution definition, where you have a flag where you can set virtual equals true. And this is kind of a request. Give me a virtual thread rather than a platform thread. And then, in order to do that, we call it Java SE runtime aware support of virtual threads. So the implementation will know which Java version it's running on. So if you're in the concurrency API, you say you're running on 21 and you set the flag virtual equals true, you will get a virtual thread. But if you're running on a Java 17 and you set the flag virtual equals true, you will get a platform thread. So we discussed whether should it be some warning, some exception, some other things happening if you ask for virtual and you were running on 17. But the team ended up with, no, just give it a platform thread. And if it's on 21, you got a virtual thread. So this is the Java SE runtime aware support of virtual threads. And concurrency, you can find more about this specification here on the Jakarta EE/specifications/short name and then number. That's the URL structure for all our specifications. So CDI is a minor update. They will support records and sealed types. You can inject a record. And deprecations, and also you can priority on producers, so you can actually say which producers should run before another or be selected instead of another. They're also moving some integration requirements from CDI into the platform, which makes sense because it's integrating how CDI is integrating with the rest of the platform, and it makes more sense to have it in the platform. So CDI spec gets a little smaller, platform spec gets a little bigger, but has the integration and things that it should be there anyway. So it probably should have been done some before. All right, expression language. Not so much going on there. A lot of deprecations and support for records. So you can use that in your expressions. They're removing some stuff. That's the major updates for that. Faces. Removing security manager. And rely on CDI. So it's kind of the CDI-centric theme of the platform. And remove some unused stuff that isn't used anymore. Servlet, also kind of the same thing, removing security manager, a more fine-grained control over the status code. So when you do it redirect, previously you would get is it a 201 that is default, but now you can actually set a body and give it another status code if you want to, like 202 or whatever. So you can have more fine-grained control over these redirects. And also a lot of cleanup in the specification. Persistent 3.2 is actually, I think, one of the specifications that are doing the most changes this time. And one of them is Java records as embeddable. I think it should be embeddable types and not classes, but I'll update the slides afterwards. So you can embed records in your entities. They're also embracing CDI, so you don't have to use the @persistent context when you inject the entity manager. You can use @inject. @persistent context will still work, but you don't have to. It's also a Java-based configuration, so you don't have to have a persistent XML. You can do it in Java code if you want to. And they're doing a lot of deprecations. The most important one is to replace the old calendar, date, time, timestamp stuff with the Java time API. So if you're using a lot of calendar as timestamps in your database stuff, entities, it's deprecated now. It will probably take a long time before it's removed. But I guess in persistence 4.0, it will be removed. And then you have to move on to using Java time rather than this, if you want to follow that upgrade. And they're also doing a lot of stuff in the criteria language, a lot of convenience methods, like statistical stuff. And if you do math things from the database and you can read all kind of things, it's a long list. It wouldn't fit on 5 slides even. So just check the persistence 3.2 specification page, and you can find all the updates that are down there. Pages, or JSP, which it used to be called, is to align what's happening with servlet and expression language, so picking up those things. And they had a lot of deprecated code from previous versions of servlets that are removing. And WebSocket is also the minor update. It's about removing the security manager and clarify the specification where it's needed. Validation is also doing one thing, and that is support Java records. It has been supported before, but it hasn't been specified in the specification how it should actually do it. So the specification now is very clear on how records should be supported. RESTful web services. So they were back and forth whether they should do a major update or a smaller. They chose to stay on the backwards compatibility path and wait a little with the 4.0 release. So they're deprecating support for @context. So in the next version, they may remove it and then use CDI instead. And the most important thing they did for the platform, which may seem weird, is to make Jakarta XML binding optional. And if you remember back there, we don't allow optional things in the platform spec. But since REST had Jakarta XML binding non-optional and treated it as optional, we actually had to bring it in and support it, but we wanted it out. And with them making XML binding optional, it's not part of the platform anymore. All right. So annotations. They're doing also one thing, and that is remove the manage beans annotation. So remember, we removed manage beans specification. That one annotation called @managebeans had to be removed as well. And that annotation is in the common annotations library or the annotation specification. So that's the update they're doing there. Interceptors are adding standard access to interceptor bindings. This is kind of for the specially interested, but those that are using the invocation context interface now have these interceptor bindings methods specified there as default methods. So you may have noticed I've skipped one. Or are you all sleeping, waiting for the party to start? Well, it's of course about data. So data is the one we're most excited about in this release, and data is a new specification that we're adding. And data will support or standardize the repository pattern for data access. And if you're familiar with Spring Data, this is doing exactly the same thing, but it's doing it a little better. And the code will look, this could have been running in a Spring application as a Spring Data repository. So it's exactly the same interfaces for I think most, or if not all, the APIs as Spring Data has. And you can create these find by name method that will find something by name, or if it's find by something else, it would translate into SQL for you, so you don't have to write the SQL yourself. One thing we're doing that Spring Data doesn't have, is the Jakarta Data Query Language, JDQL. And that is an extension, or it's a subset of the Jakarta Persistence Query Language. And where you can write your queries in a sort of SQL-like thing. So in this one, the method books by type, and then we can write this query where title like title. So I just type this, and then sometimes on stage, so this can be a little confusing. So the method signature and the actual query is different things. So be careful a little bit how we use it, but it's very powerful, and you can write things much more advanced than this. It's a language on its own. So let's do a demo of Jakarta Data. So in this application, you can see I'm running on 22. I'm using the latest milestone of Jakarta 11, so it's the M3 that was released yesterday. And then I've added the Open Liberty Maven plugin, and that's just to get the Open Liberty runtime. That is one of the implementations of the platform, and they also have an implementation of Jakarta Data. And then I've added MySQL as my database. If I look at how the application is configured, this is how you would configure a regular, simple Jakarta REST application in Jakarta EE. You would simply extend the application and set the application path. Then I have a greeting resource that is a RESTful endpoint that is having the and it will be /API/greeting, where you can find all greetings. It just returns an empty list there. And I can post a greeting in by posting some JSON into this endpoint. And the greeting itself is just a Jakarta Persistence entity with an ID, name, and message. So it's a very simple application. So if I wanted to add, I can run it here. First, and I'll run Liberty in this dev mode, the option they have, so you don't have to restart it when you do code changes. It just picks it up. So I'll just start it there, and then just try the API and see if it works. So if I take this getter, you see it returns an empty list. And if I do the post, where did it go? Let me see. So if I do the posts, there we go. Oh, there. So if I post this hello from Mrs. Duke here, it will add say OK, but it won't add anything because the method isn't doing anything yet. Right? So but both endpoints works. So if I wanted to add a Jakarta Data here, I would simply add a new Java class on top, interface, greeting repository. So I'll add this, and then I'll add the @repository annotation here. You can see it's the Jakarta Data repository. And then I would extend the CRUD repository of greeting with the primary key long. So this is all I have to do to to have this created for me. So if I now go in the greeting resource here and then inject this repository, greeting repository, like this, and then rather than returning an empty list, I can return the greeting repository, find all. And here you can see I have all these default find all, find by ID and stuff get generated for me, so I don't have to write them myself. So just do a find all and to list. And then at the same time here, for the saving the message, I can do I can create a greeting here, call it saved, equal greeting repository, save, not save all, save greeting, like this. And then I can, in the output, I can just write out a created greeting with ID is saved get ID, something like this. So if I now do the get, it will still say it's nothing there. But if I do inject Mrs. Duke here, and then I now have Mrs. Duke in the database. So, but there's no Mrs. Duke on her own, or we also need Duke. So we have Duke and Mrs. Duke in the database. So now we have both of them here. So you see, this is how easy it is to use Jakarta data, the default stuff. I haven't written a single database access thing yet. But what if I wanted to search by name and only have the Duke message here, for example? Then I can do this, return an optional greeting, and find by name, ignore case, string name. Just create this method for me here. And then in the greeting resource, I can use this one. So here I've cheated a little bit. So I'm doing the @get, and I'm adding the path parameter for name. And then I do the find by name on this name and print it. And if I don't find it, I print not found. So I added this. So now we should be able to try it out. So if I go in here and do the find by name, so I want to do greetings here, I'll do just Duke, and run this one. It says hello from Duke. So this is how easy you can create simple queries with the Spring Data implementation or the Jakarta data. So it's pretty cool. There's also an opportunity here. So I demoed the Open Liberty version implementation here. Hibernate is implementing it. At Eclipse Foundation, we're sort of either bringing in Hibernate implementation into Glassfish or the Hibernate implementation into Eclipse Link and how it should be done. But we should have a standalone implementation at the major software foundations out there. So we would really like to see somebody implement Jakarta data at Apache as well as at Eclipse Foundation. It's not a big spec, so it's fairly easy to do. And there are some code examples out there from both Hibernate and Open Liberty that I can look at and see how it's done. And that would be really good for the community to have these implementations to choose from. We also have the concept of prospective specifications. There's a new term we're adding now, and that is specifications that are not part of the platform, but we're adding it to mentioning it in the specification that this is something implementers should look at because this is something that is fairly mature and may be added later. And if you look at how server-side rendering is suddenly hot again, and people are talking about React server components and whatnot doing stuff on the server. We've done that for more than 20 years. We know this. And we have Jakarta MVC that is standardized in action-based model view controller. It has partials. So the HTMX stuff can be easily supported here. HTMX is kind of the same thing that we've had in Faces since 2009. they're saying, hey, XMX has Ajax. Well, we did that back fairly long time ago as well. And MVC is one of those specifications that is out there, it works. It is included in Glassfish and is included in Wildfly. And when we list it as prospective specification, it will possibly be included in more implementations and potentially be a candidate for inclusion in Jakarta EE 12. And MVC is built on top of Jakarta REST, so you add the @controller annotation or the @view. You can also return the view from the method with a string, or they're flexible. There are different ways of doing it. So it's a very flexible way of doing a request response action-based controller on top of Jakarta REST. So this is kind of something we looked at Spring MVC, because if you look at Spring MVC was there first, and then they created the REST controller on top of Spring MVC. We're doing it the other way around. We had REST, and then we're building MVC on top of the REST. So we're doing the same thing, just backwards. Jakarta NoSQL will probably not be a prospective specification because they haven't released a final version of their specification yet. But if they do, in time for the Jakarta EE 11 release, they will be listed as a prospective specification as well. And Jakarta NoSQL is standardized in integration with NoSQL databases. And one thing interesting about Jakarta NoSQL is that it implements Jakarta data as well, or the implementation of Jakarta NoSQL implements Jakarta data. So potentially, the Eclipse JNoSQL, which is an implementation of Jakarta NoSQL, can be included in Glassfish, for example, to have passed the Jakarta data TCK. And then you can use MongoDB or Neo4j or some other NoSQL databases with Jakarta data as well. Yeah. Jakarta RPC is another specification that is there. It has a fair amount of code started with, but it's kind of stagnated a little bit. So if you're interested in or know about gRPC and Java and wants to help out this specification, this is a good place to go, because they are desperately needing someone to just poke them on the mailing list or issue trackers and start doing some stuff. Look at the code and start doing it. And this is also, as well as the Jakarta data implementation open source somewhere, these two are very easy to grab ways of becoming a hero in open source. You'll get a name out there. You can speak at conferences around the world about this stuff. And the goal with gRPC is not to replace gRPC in Java in any way. It's to make it easier to use. So the same way as we're doing for Jakarta persistence is making SQL easier to use in Java, and NoSQL, Jakarta NoSQL is making NoSQL easier to use. Jakarta RPC will make gRPC easier to use in Java. So to sum up, Jakarta EE 9 brought us the namespace change. But if you're having problems with the namespace change, and especially if you're Spring developers these days, the transformation capabilities we made around the Jakarta EE 9, that is the Eclipse Transformer and the Apache Tomcat migration tool, will help you do these transformations of the bytecode if you have transitive dependencies. And these two tools are very good at that, and you can choose whichever one of them you want. They're doing the same thing, essentially. Jakarta EE 10 brought us a lot of updates to specifications, because at 9 we limited the updates to the namespace change to make the migration easier. It would have been harder, this migration from JavaX to Jakarta, if we have done a lot of changes in the specifications. But we chose not to do it because we wanted the migration to be as easy as possible and get people to a newer platform. And now we can start doing changes. And Jakarta EE 10 was a lot of maintenance updates to all of these specifications. And in 11, we're starting delivering new things, such as data. So if we remember this one from one of the first slides. So in 2020, it was 9. In 2022, it was 10. In 2024, we deliver 11. And we're doing Java 21. We're doing embracing records. Jakarta data is new add there. We're moving along the CDI-centric approach. And we're doing a lot of removals and deprecations in the specification. And I hope this, in sum, will boost your productivity and especially the performance And if you use the virtual flag on the concurrency utilities, you will get the virtual capabilities for Jakarta 11. So, even though we're setting the baseline on 17, we are encouraging you to use 21. We believe most will use 21. That's where the efforts will be on implementations going forward. And always stay on as new Java version as you can. And just running an old app on 21 will make it a lot faster than running on a previous Java version. If you want to learn more about Jakarta EE, I have a course available on LinkedIn. If you have a LinkedIn Learning account, you can scan this QR code. If you don't have LinkedIn Learning or don't want to pay for some reason, you can send me a note on LinkedIn that you saw the talk here and ask me for a free link. If you want to learn more about Jakarta EE, it's very simple, jakarta.ee. Type it in the URL and you'll find everything there. If you want to get started, you go to start.jakarta.ee. It's similar to the Spring initializer. You can generate a project, get a zip file, and up and running in 2 clicks. And you can read my blog on my domain or Eclipse Foundation domain. Weekly updates, #Jakarta EE. Just Google it and you'll find it. And the demo code is called Duke's Data. It's on my GitHub. You can also just Google Duke's Data. I guess you won't get much other hits than this one. So, with that, I thank you very much for listening, and I'm very happy you chose to be here, even though they're probably serving drinks outside very soon. So, if you have any questions, I'm here. Otherwise, thank you very much for listening. Anyone? Thursday, everybody. Yeah. Get out there and go by the Eclipse Foundation booth and see if there are some swag left.